Good evening. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you tonight. As most of you know, usually when I give an exhortation or an occasional sermon, most of the time I kind of start out with a short story. I kind of feel like it helps me tie into what I want to talk about, and hopefully helps you see where I'm coming from. Most of the time the stories kind of have a humorous twist to them, but my story tonight is really not a humorous one. As most of you also know, I've told you before, my mother was a member of the Lord's church. My father was not. And I know it's a very common expression. I know it's probably overused at times. But my father was a very good moral person. My two brothers are quite a bit older than I am. One of them turns 75 tomorrow, and my other turned 72 yesterday. So from all I've ever been told, he was pretty tough on them. He was a little bit rough around the edges maybe at that time. But by the time I came along 19 years later, can you say whoops? He had changed and melded quite a bit. But he was still very strict about a lot of things. As Andrew talked about in our class on Romans 14 a couple of weeks ago, my father would not allow us to have a deck of cards in the house. He thought it was a form of gambling. We couldn't even play a game as simple as go fish. And maybe that's why I don't know a thing about card games today. When people pull out cards and start playing, I'm like, I don't know the rules. I don't know. Even though I have no problem with it, I just don't know the rules. He wouldn't let us have a game in the house that used dice to move. If you just move from spot A to spot B by rolling the dice, he wouldn't allow us to have that. He thought that was a form of gambling also. He was very strict about going to movies. I bet I may have seen 5 to 10 movies in my lifetime growing up as a child. And I guarantee all those were Disney movies, and back when Disney movies were safe to go to. So once again, he was real strict about things, but he was not a member of the Lord's church. I'm not sure what year it was. It was probably in the late 90s because my dad passed away in 2002. One night, he and my mother were out for supper. They went to a restaurant that they ate at quite a bit in Roebuck. As they were eating, a man that attended where my mother worshiped spotted her from across the room. He got up and approached where they were sitting. He came up and said hello to my mother, introduced himself to my dad. Now, obviously, he knew my dad did not attend church with my mother. And in most cases like that, you think you might kind of start out with a simple type of general question, a lighthearted question. What did you do for a living, Mr. Pennington? Or, boy, it sure has been hot lately, or it sure has been cold lately. But instead, he looked directly at my dad, never met him once before in his life, and said, in an abrupt manner, where do you go to church? I'm sure my dad was apprehensive about answering it because he knew it might be an uncomfortable situation. And I will admit that my dad, he attended a lot of different denominations in his lifetime. At the time, I'm pretty sure he attended a small Baptist church in Roebuck called Fellowship Baptist. I'm not positive of that name, but I think that was right. But I know the next part of the story is absolutely true. I remember my mother vividly telling me the details of this, and it stuck with me for all these years. The man who did not know my dad from anybody got down with his hands on the table like this in front of my dad, eyeball to eyeball, pointed his finger at my dad, and he said, I'll tell you one thing, buddy. You won't make it to heaven in the Baptist church. Got up, walked away, and didn't say another word to my dad. Now, before I go any further, let me be perfectly clear. As I'm sure most everyone sitting here tonight, I'm fully convinced that Christ founded one church, which is his one body. We know that from passages like Matthew 16, Ephesians 4, and Ephesians 1, and many more. That he hates division, he hates disunity, and he had no plan for all the hundreds of denominations that we see today in this world. But the way that man handled the situation with my dad that night was very poor for someone that professed to be a Christian. My mother didn't tell me how the ride home went that night, but I'm sure it went one of two ways, either a very uncomfortable silence or one of arguments, one of the two. And I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think my dad probably would have ever changed. But the attitude that the man had that night with my father helped grow the preconceived notions that he had about the Church of Christ. And I know my dad was responsible for his own actions like we all are. There's no excuses for anybody. But he had a wife who had been a member of the church for 60 years. He had 3 sons, 2 which remained faithful, who believed the same. You just never know as you approach the end of your life that maybe you might sit back and think, maybe what they think is right. Maybe I need to study that again. Maybe I need to think about that one more time. But even if he had not done that contemplation, the way the man talked to my dad that night was full of arrogance in his attitude. And it surely helped convince my dad that I don't want nothing to do with that. I was right in what I thought all along. So using this story as my springboard, I kind of want to talk about some Christian attitudes tonight. Some of which are negative and some of which are positive. And of course, we could turn to Galatians 5 and just read through the fruit of the Spirit. That would be an easy thing to do and a very familiar thing to do. And there would be nothing wrong with that. But I want to kind of approach it from a different perspective. So using my dad's attitude, the first thing I'd like to turn to tonight, I'm sorry, not my dad's attitude, the man's attitude toward my dad. Let's turn to Luke chapter 18. Luke chapter 18, we'll start reading in verse 9. This is a very familiar passage that is a parable from Christ about two men who went up to the temple to pray. And we'll read verses 9 through 14. Also he spoke this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and despised others. Two men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood and prayed thus with himself, God, I thank you that I'm not like other men, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, or even this tax collector. I fast twice a week, I give tithes of all I possess. And the tax collector, standing afar off, would not so much raise his eyes to heaven, but beat his breast, saying, God be merciful to me, a sinner. I tell you, this man went down to his house justified rather than the other. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and who humbles himself will be exalted. The tax collector displayed a humble attitude as he approached his father in prayer. He knew he could never be good enough to pray to God because of his sins, like we all have. But because of the mercy of God, he was able to approach his throne. He had the ability to do so, and he asked for mercy in doing so. On the other hand, the Pharisee's attitude reminded me of the way that the man approached my dad that evening. The Pharisee's prayer was full of arrogance, and instead of being about God and his mercy, it was about all the good things he had done to earn his spot before God. When we approach those in the world that are lost with the attitude that we have all the answers, and that we are right, and you're wrong, and I'm going to show you just how right I am, we portray Christ as being that way also. We know that's not true. If we ever think we're going to convert someone to Christ with an attitude of superiority, we're sadly mistaken. Everything we ever read about Christ is one of attitude of humility and servitude. We think about him washing the dirt-covered feet of his disciples, and he was the Son of God. Does the picture of Christ washing someone's feet portray arrogance or humility? That's an obvious answer, isn't it? And of course, our mind should go straight to the cross. And the attitude Christ portrayed as he faced death from bloodthirsty men who deep down knew he had done nothing wrong. Turn over to Luke chapter 23 with me. Chapter 23, read verses 32 through 34. There were also two others, criminals, led with him to be put to death. And when they had come to the place called Calvary, there they crucified him, and the criminals, one on the right hand, the other on the left. Then Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do. And they divided his garments and cast lots. So we have sinless Jesus hanging between two common criminals. He asked God to forgive those who unlawfully were putting him to death. And we get so angry when people in this world wrong us in simplistic things of this world that don't really matter. And yet Christ displayed the most perfect example of the attitude we should have as Christians toward those that are lost and need compassion in the gospel. Now, still thinking about the example of my dad and that man that evening, let's think of it from the opposite perspective. Let's talk about the attitude we should have concerning the hope that we have as Christians while we're on earth. As we just said, we should never have a display an attitude of arrogance on our salvation. But at the same time, we should not act as if we have no hope. I'm sure we've all known Christians that if you ask them about their hope of heaven, they act as if they have no chance to ever make it. I think sometimes in an effort to not be overconfident, we go too much to the other extreme and make it seem like that the blood that was shed for us cannot do what it was intended to do. Turn with me, if you would, to 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. First Thessalonians chapter 4, we'll start reading in verse 13. But I do not want you to be ignorant, brethren, concerning those who have fallen asleep, lest you sorrow as others who have no hope. For if we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so God will bring with him those who sleep in Jesus. For this we say to you by the word of the Lord, and that we who are alive and remain till the coming of the Lord will by no means precede those who are asleep. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout, the voice of an archangel, and the trumpet of God, and the dead in Christ will rise first. Then we who are alive and remain shall be caught up together with him in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. And thus we all shall always be with the Lord. Therefore comfort one another with these words. Paul here is talking about the second coming of Christ, obviously. Those who are outside of Christ will experience a sadness and a remorse unlike anything that we can imagine when he comes again and their fate is sealed. But those in Christ have a hope that cannot be enjoyed by those outside the fold of God. Now, while we should always remember passages such as John 15 and Romans 11 that tell us to take heed because we can always throw our salvation away, as long as we're trying to live faithfully to the best of our abilities, we should be confident in the hope of our salvation. Turn with me to Romans chapter 5. Romans 5, we'll read verses 1 through 9. Therefore, having been justified by faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ, through whom we also have access by faith into this grace in which we stand and rejoice in hope of the glory of God. And not only that, but we also glory in tribulations, knowing that tribulation produces perseverance, perseverance character, and character hope. Now hope does not disappoint, because the love of God has been poured out in our hearts by the Holy Spirit who was given to us. For when we were still without strength, in due time Christ died for the ungodly. For scarcely for a righteous man will one die, yet perhaps for a good man, someone would dare to die. But God demonstrates his own love toward us, that while we were still yet sinners, Christ died for us. Much more then, having now been justified by his blood, we shall be saved from wrath through him. So hope cannot and will not disappoint, because Christ died for us while we were still ungodly, to allow us to have a chance to be justified through his blood and be called godly. 1 Corinthians 13:13 lists hope as one of the three great attitudes that we as Christians should all have. Hebrews 7:19 tells us the new covenant of Christ established by his blood is a better covenant, and it brought in a hope by which we draw near to God. This hope that all these scriptures talk about is not an arrogant, it's not a boasting type of hope. But at the same time, it's a hope that can be believed in and can be used to help us weather anything that shakes our faith. It can also be used to confidently but lovingly talk to others about that hope and try to convince them that the hope is for them too. The third attitude I would like to address tonight is a healthy fear of God. You know, it's so obvious to us in the world that we live in that the world has absolutely no fear and respect for God and his word. We are bombarded constantly with opinions and politics and beliefs of the majority of the world that want us to know that it's all about them and not about God. And we've come to expect this. And I'm afraid, unfortunately, the shock value of it all has worn off. And it's worn off on us too. That's where it begins to be scary. Because if we don't care, if it doesn't bother us, then maybe we've lost our fear of God also. You know, there are just some things that, because we live in the world, that we cannot avoid seeing, we cannot avoid hearing, and being inundated by. But when we shrug our shoulders and say, oh well, that's when we begin to lose our perspective as to who we are. In John 15:19, Christ tells his followers that we are not of this world. And basically, if the world does not hate our ways, then we better take a step back and reevaluate who we are and what we stand for. We're told in 2 Timothy 2:12 that all who live godly will suffer persecution. So if we're not any different from the rest of society, then we really, truly can't be fearing God. You know, there are some things that are just so obvious, and they jump out as us. If we participate in these things, we tell God, I don't care what you think. Things such as drinking, adultery, a filthy mouth, pornography, you name it, the list can go on and on. But what about some things that we don't seem to think are that big of a deal? We know God doesn't classify sin, but we seem to do that as human beings. Do I truly fear God when I choose not to bring my family to Bible classes each week? Do I truly fear God when I choose to let things related to school or work or entertainment come before my attendance at worship? Sure, we all know things happen that sometimes we can't avoid. But I'm talking about a deliberate choice that we make to put God second when we do have that choice. Do I truly fear God when I give of my means after I budget for everything else first? Do I truly fear God when I'm not offended by the filth of the world anymore and act if there's nothing I can do when there's something I can do? We're all familiar with Proverbs 1:7 that teaches the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. And Proverbs is full of verses that talk about a healthy fear of God. Turn with me to Proverbs chapter 3. Let's read one there. Proverbs chapter 3, we'll read verses 5 through 8. Proverbs 3, 5 through 8. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, he shall direct your paths. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and depart from evil. It will be health to your flesh and strength to your bones. So basically it's very simple. If we do not fear God, then we think we're too wise for him. And when that's the case, as we well know, pride goes before destruction and the Holy Spirit before a fall. And that will lead to eternal consequences. You know, probably every one of us was initially converted to Christ at a point in time when we feared Christ coming and we were not prepared. We knew what to do, but we had not done it. And sure, that's got to grow into a love for God and respect for his commands and want to obey him. But at the same time, we don't need to lose that fear. We always need to have that healthy fear of God where we risk letting our lives be just like the rest of society where we're weaved together with him and we don't stand out at all. The final two things I'd like to talk about are kind of some things that Al touched on this morning. We talked yesterday about our sermons and our topics were going to be and didn't think they were going to correspond with each other, but I think I'm going to do some same things Al did, but maybe from a different perspective, so hopefully it should be fine. The next thing I want to talk about is having a genuine care for others, especially those that are our brothers and sisters. You know, this is an easy area to give lip service to. It's easy to say, sure, I love my brothers and sisters. That's easy to say, but sometimes it's hard to do or hard to put in practice, and I know for sure I'm guilty of that. I need to be better. Turn with me to James chapter 2. James chapter 2, we're going to read verses 14 through 18. What does it profit, my brethren, if someone says he has faith but does not have works? Can faith save him? If a brother or sister is naked and destitute of daily food, and one says to them, depart in peace, be warmed and filled, but you do not give them things which are needed for the body, what does it profit? Thus also faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. But someone will say, you have faith and I have works. Show me your faith without your works, and I will show you my faith by my works. So if we don't truly make an effort to help others when we have the ability to do so, we're not showing true compassion and care for them. Turn with me to another example in Matthew chapter 25. Matthew 25, I'm going to start in verse 31. This is a lengthy reading here, a very familiar one to us. Chapter 25, verse 31 through 46. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the holy angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate them one from another, as a shepherd divides his sheep from the goats. He will set the sheep on his right hand and the goats on the left. Then the king will say to those on the right hand, come, you blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me. And then the righteous will answer him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? When did we see you a stranger and take you in, or naked and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and come to you? And the king will answer and say to them, surely I say to you, inasmuch as you did it to one of the least of these of my brethren, you did it to me. Then he will also say to those on the left hand, depart from me, you cursed, into the everlasting fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, you did not take me in. Naked, you did not clothe me. Sick and in prison, you did not visit me. Then they also will answer him, saying, Lord, when do we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or sick or in prison and did not minister to you? Then he will answer them, But surely I say to you, inasmuch as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me. These will go away into everlasting punishment, but the righteous into eternal life. So Christ tells us here, if we do not take care of others, then we're not taking care of him, doing the same exact thing to him. Showing no care for your brethren means you do not love Christ. Turn with me to one more scripture, 1 John chapter 4. This is the one that Zach read for us earlier. Not Zach, I'm sorry, Michael. 1 John chapter 4. We're just going to read the last 3 verses of it. 19 through 21. We love him because he first loved us. If someone says, I love God, and hates his brother, he's a liar. For he does not love his brother whom he has seen. How can he love God whom he has not seen? And this commandment we have from him, that he who loves God must love his brother also. We're simply liars if we don't love our brother and say we love God. The two are not compatible with one another. They will not work side by side. As we talked about earlier, Christ was the ultimate example of a servant while he was here on earth. And he was the sinless Son of God. We are the created. We're created in his image, and somehow we expect that we don't have to do for our brethren. How can we have thoughts like that? Sure, some of us may have more monetary abilities than others to help others out. But there's so many ways that you can help serve also. You can cut someone's grass who can't do it anymore. You can take and build someone who's going through a tough time. You can give someone a ride to service who can't drive at night anymore. We can simply be an encouragement to others. We can pat these young men on the back when they come up here for the first time and read their first scripture, lead their first song, or give their first talk. We can thank the women who I think have one of the toughest and yet most important tasks of all in teaching class to the young babies. When those babies are crying and screaming when their mothers walk out the door, and those teachers are wondering, am I doing any good? You can go and tell them, yes, you are. You're doing a ton of good, more than you ever know. We can take our time to find that new brother or sister in Christ, or one that comes back to Christ, and hug them, tell them we love them, tell them we're praying for them, let them know they can call on us if they need help or encouragement. You know, I think we're all probably guilty at times of holding back our congratulations to those who we're told to rejoice with. Maybe it's selfishness, maybe it's jealousy creeping in, but we should show our genuine care to those who are experiencing things in their lives that they want to share with us. We should be closest to our brethren, and if we are close to them, we know what their needs truly are, and we'll look for ways to fulfill them. The final thing I'd like to talk about tonight is kind of related to this last point here. And it's simply, we need to take the attitude of, what can I do around this congregation to help? We all have so many diverse abilities that we can use in the service of the Lord. I can do some things that maybe you can't do. And I guarantee you there's some things you can do that I can't. I wish I had the ability to lead a song. I have zero singing ability. I have zero ability to lead the congregation in a song. That's just the way it is. I feel sorry for Michael Baggett. He has to hear me croon in his ear every Sunday and Wednesday night. I'm just hoping Click can sing loud enough to drown me out, because he can sing good. But you know what? Maybe if I can't lead a song, maybe I can bring a sermon. Maybe I can head the Lord's table. Maybe I can lead a public prayer. Maybe I can teach a class. I remember we had not been here very long, and Bill Gravitt, who was an elder at the time, came to me and asked me to teach either the junior high or the senior high class. I was very reluctant. I said, Bill, I don't know any of these kids. I barely know their parents. I just don't know if I'm ready to do that or not. He looked at me and he said, Ricky, just teach them the truth. And I guarantee you that probably wasn't the best job I've ever done. Probably the worst. It's the first one. He probably wouldn't get it all. But I did what he said. I just taught the truth, and it went okay. He was right. You just got to do it. Just do like Bill said. Just teach the truth. You know, maybe you can't do things from a public nature. But we need people to address the monthly bulletins. There's not enough people to do that every month. People need to help cut the grass, fix things that break around the building, clean the building. There's never enough couples to help clean the building. You name it. There's always something to be done to help in some way. We mentioned earlier the job of teaching the young children's classes. You probably don't want us guys doing that. We just don't do as good a job as the women do. That's just the way it is. We're so blessed to have godly women who will do a fantastic job with those classes. Those women also might prepare the Lord's Supper, prepare meals for the sick, teach Bible classes in their homes for other women. But if you're a woman, you can't do some of those things, you can always send a card to somebody who's sick or hurting. You make it a point to go find someone who needs some encouragement, and pat them on the back, give them a hug, and tell them you're thinking about them. As the song we sing says, there's room in the kingdom of God, my brother, for the small things that we can do. There should be no one who says, I couldn't find anything to do. It's a matter of the heart. If you want to do something, you can find something to do. 2 Timothy 2:15 tells us to present ourselves approved to God, a worker. 1 Corinthians 3:9 says that we are God's fellow workers. And Ephesians 2:10 says we are created in Christ Jesus for good works. And we are warned in several places to not be busybodies involved in useless things. And we do that just by staying busy in God's Word. So in conclusion, brethren, sometimes I don't think we realize how much of an influence we have on others around us from the attitudes that we present. We can pique someone's interest in the gospel by the way we act, or we can turn them off just as quickly based on the way that we act. And it doesn't have to be someone just on the outside of the building either. We can cause divisions and uneasiness and strife amongst each other if we don't have the proper Christ-like attitude we're commanded to have with those that we're supposed to have a common faith with. I think we all know that we cannot good our way into heaven because of the fact that we're all sinners and need the blood of Christ. But we can for sure bad our way out of heaven. And having bad attitudes or not having good attitudes is certainly one way to do it. So tonight, think about where you stand before God as we close out this service and this year. These attitudes are important ones that God's children either should or should not have based on which one we're talking about. But if you're not yet a child of God or not a faithful servant anymore, and you need to make changes in your life, you need to have another type of attitude. You need to take the attitude of, will I get a chance in 2018 to make things right with God? We don't know. Even though the invitation of God is always open, is this possibly the last public invitation that I'll ever hear? We just don't know. We never know when the opportunities will cease. And whatever attitudes we have chosen in our lives here will determine how we'll be judged by Christ. So please take a minute tonight and make a life-changing decision that you'll never regret while the time is still available and we stand and sing for encouragement.